تقل قد ذهبت أربابه كل من سار على الدرب وصل في ازدياد العلم إرغام العدا وجمال العلم إصلاح العمل جمل المنطق بالنحو فمن يحرم الإعراب بالنطق اختبل انظم الشعر ولازم مذهبي في اطراح الرفض لا تبغي النحل.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to episode 5 of Ibn Battuta's Boat. This is a podcast in which we discuss contemporary issues of Muslims living here in the UK and how can we reconcile these kind of issues and these kind of topics and discussions with our faith, which is Islam. In the past episodes, we've had guest speakers like Sheikh Abu Ubaid, Ustad Yahya Al-Rabi, Jamal Abdel Nasser, Khalid Hassan, Abdul Samad, and we've discussed a plethora of different topics such as activism, Iman, Quran, ilm, extremism, and many other things. Alhamdulillah, today's episode was very, very beneficial, and inshallah Muhammad here is going to go into who our guest speaker actually was.
So today we were joined by Ismail, a proud Londoner, South London, and his experiences kind of stem from his creative arts background, political activism, and growing up in Uganda for the formative part of his secondary school life, and also having kind of taken part in TEDx talks, and also kind of the mindset that he goes through in terms of writing his pieces, and also the fact that he's been able to produce a piece of work that represents his craft.
MashaAllah, Ismail did not leave any topic unnoticed, and we covered a plethora of issues and discussions that are really truly interesting in terms of the Muslim perspectives. And one of the things he talks about is his 4-year stint, his 4 years of education that was in Uganda, and how that fared with and how that compares with his education in the UK. Then we discuss about the decolonization of secular education. During Ismail's undergraduate degree, he built a huge passion towards community activism and politics, not just to do with his undergraduate degree itself, but out of frustration he actually compiled an actual anthology, and he will discuss the compilation of that and how he went to perform around various universities around the country with that anthology. And then we move on to how we can, and finally a very important discussion on how we reconcile between the faith and we reconcile with the creative arts, because creative arts in and of itself is a very interesting discussion on its use and its benefits. Ismail recognizes that, and he actually talks about his journey and going back and forth, experiencing faith in a new light and his new perspectives in terms of building the vision for the Muslim community. Ismail is a very passionate man, and he's actually the brother of Muhammad Chilangani here, and he will talk about, and as you will see in the episode, you will see not just Ismail, you will see all of us incredibly engaged on the discussions regarding culture, Muslim identity, also how we can improve and make a difference in the community. Ultimately, is our creative art, is our activism in our own realms, is that going to benefit the Muslim community? Is there a drawing point where we have to step back a bit? It's a very interesting discussion. I was truly inspired, and I honestly ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve him and to preserve everyone here, and to preserve our wonderful producer who's given us this studio, Al-Huda television, mashallah, and continuously Allah has given us a lot of blessings. And I hope that you enjoy this episode. It's a very long episode, and this intro is a long one as well. So we ask Allah to make it beneficial for you, and I hope you enjoy it. Do take it in steps. Don't take all of it.
Don't forget to go into the descriptions and make sure you check out all the social medias of Ismail, of Ibn Battuta's Boat, of Huda Television.
Links to some of his work,
Yep.
the Lost Essays.
All the social medias, follow them, like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Jazakallah khair.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
How are you doing, Shaib?
Alhamdulillah, all good, bro.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well.
How are you doing? For episode 5, we're joined with our guest Ismail. Alhamdulillah, my younger brother.
You wasn't meant to give it away that. They were meant to do the bio and then he's actually my brother as well.
So yeah, Ismail, alhamdulillah, has been on a journey in terms of obviously spoken word and kind of going through the journey of kind of going through the system of studying in the UK, travelling to Uganda and various other things. So he's been quite involved in the community in terms of political activism and also engaging with the youth, Muslim youth, and just the youth in general in terms of kind of across the UK. And so with this episode, we're looking to kind of focus in on his journey and kind of take home messages with regards to the things that he's seen on this journey. So yeah, without further ado, we could begin.
Who wants to do the icebreaker?
The icebreaker,
Yeah. So what's the icebreaker?
Okay, so icebreaker. We're thinking, so personality-wise, personality is quite key, right?
Go and drop it.
So if you were to describe your personality in any way, shape or form, what would it be like if it were to be like a salad or something that we could eat?
So basically our personality is a bit edible.
Yeah, if our personality was edible, a healthy edible salad, what would it look like?
MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, amma ba'd. Oh, subhanAllah, it's a good question. I think for myself, I would be, first of all, I'd need some olives in there. Probably my brother knows me well. Olives are...
I was going to say that. That was the first thing I was going to say, olives.
You know, I feel like
What,
olives
for yourself
me,
or for him?
for myself.
For myself. What olives do you? Black ones or
The green ones, or I don't know, they call them white olives or green ones.
white olives?
White, yeah, so white olives. Just because of their texture, they're quite firm,
No, man, trust me.
and they complement anything you have them with. So I feel like for me, that would definitely be a thing. I'll have a bit of lettuce in there just
Do
because.
you have it seeded olives, so we take the seed out?
Oh, no seeds.
No
It's
seeds.
just easier. It's just easier to.
Yeah, same.
It's easier to
The
digest.
black ones usually have seeds.
Yeah, no, but even both have it as well.
Alhamdulillah.
Anything else? Just gonna have
But
olives.
a bit of lettuce as well.
Have to have lettuce.
Lettuce is crispy. It's hydrating. It's, you know, alhamdulillah.
Revitalizing.
and just a bit of lemon sprinkle on
Some
that.
lemon
A bit of
juice.
zest.
How does that relate to your personality?
I feel like in terms of the, especially in terms of the lemon, I feel like it's I've got elements of my personality that are a bit.
You said lemon as well. I was going to say lemon.
So apparently you guys have the same personality.
Subhanallah.
Far from it, I think.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm miskin, bro.
Yeah. I mean, lemons. They're quite. They leave a taste on your tongue. You know, they leave an impact, and that's what I try to do. I try to kind of leave an impact of everyone I meet, and kind of leave something there. You know, take away a message or something. So, alhamdulillah, that's why I like lemons, is that they always kind of leave you with that, you know, that taste.
Okay, mashallah.
What about lettuce though? How come you give lettuce?
Lettuce, because they blend in. You know, lettuce, they just kind of blend in, and they're crunchy, and they just blend in and do their own thing. You know, and that's I like to do that sometimes. I don't always like to be at the forefront. Sometimes I just like to blend in with the crowd and kind of see what's going on. So
And then the olives?
the olives, because of the texture, they're firm.
Really? Okay.
And
I can beat that one.
you might have a better reason than me why you. Yeah.
Mashallah,
Olives
that's
is
good. You know, you guys told me this icebreaker salad. I was like, what the hell am I going to say? I didn't know what to say, but
Yeah.
you've done pretty well there, so I have a good idea of what I want to say now, but not me
No.
first.
Who's to go next? You want to go next?
No, not me,
I
not me,
don't
not me.
mind going for it.
Go because I'm too.
I'm a salad eater, so I could probably bring in a few more. But I'd probably bring in some kale. You take some kale.
Kale.
Kale doesn't. When you eat kale, it doesn't feel nice. But there's a lot of vitamin D content.
Oh,
It's
so you're
healthy for you.
So
It's
you're-
very healthy for
so
you.
what's that got to
nutritious.
do
You're saying you're not a very nice person, but you
On the
know,
outside, I might seem quite serious and a bit forthcoming, but yeah, when you get to know me, it's a lot easier.
okay, mashallah.
So that's probably the element there. Tomatoes.
Tomatum, yeah.
What was that?
Arabic.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So I'd say there's an element of juiciness and probably wittiness.
Do you like salad tomatoes? Or did you get the big ones, cooking ones?
The big ones every now and then, but
Oh.
the small ones, the cherry tomatoes.
My-
Yeah, cherry
Yeah,
tomatoes.
they
yeah,
work.
yeah. You can't have big tomatoes in salad,
Can't
man.
have
Nah, you
cherry
need the
tomatoes.
cherry tomatoes.
Yeah, cherry tomatoes are the one in
Tesco's
salad.
finest.
Shut up.
Mashallah.
What else would I have there? I was going to say spinach, but that's not really there. You need to cook the spinach.
Oh, you want to?
No, you can have spinach
can have
leaves on its
spinach,
own.
sure.
Yeah, you can.
So probably raw. There's an element of some conversations being a bit deep.
Yeah.
That's just me. The reality of life is the reality of life sometimes. It's not every time that you're going to have a deep conversation, but whenever the opportunity does arise, share the story of where you're coming from. So I really like to hear these things.
Damn. It's going to be me now, yeah, okay. I would say, I'm going to say I'm more of a fruit salad. Than, I'll say I'm more of a fruit salad, like different colours that you get in fruit. I think that describes my personality in different ways. I think I come across quite vibrant most of the time, but there's different tones of that vibrancy. With family it may be different, with friends it may be different, with my wife it might be something else. So, but I think there's always vibrancy in sort of every part. But then also, with that being said, there are some, I don't know if it's good to say darker parts. I don't know. What dark fruits are there?
It's grapes.
Grapes, yeah. Like more darker parts, which I would like to say, which are more serious parts to myself.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is like, like the reason I didn't want to say dark here is because I say when I'm saying serious part, I mean more of when I'm being more religious, or not being more religious, but being more kind of observant of like my prayers or my Quran, or my giving reminders or anything, more kind of in that zone. And I don't want to take that as, okay, that's a dark version of yourself, but I just mean that dark has that serious connotation, so maybe some black grapes.
So basically
in
you're fruity but pious.
Okay, I didn't want to say fruity. Okay.
That's a dangerous one.
I don't want to say pious either. I don't think any of those apply.
You're a fruit salad.
Let's just say it's a fruit salad. There's vibrancy. There's some seriousness. Let's leave it at that.
What would you have inside the fruit salad though? What would you have in there?
So
Some jackfruit.
yeah, I've never had jackfruit, so I don't know, man. I don't
If you're
know.
Pakistani,
Sweet, very
there
sweet.
might be a
Mangoes.
chance you've had chaat masala in there.
Yeah. No. Okay.
Do you have
Okay.
chaat
Yeah.
masala in
Okay.
there?
I'll say put some chaat masala in there because I'm Pakistani, so you gotta have a bit of a spice there.
Represent.
Yeah. You gotta have. I think what's a very British fruit? I'm not sure. What's quite British? Oranges?
I don't know, man. The Brits took everything, so.
Pears.
Maybe pears.
I don't see pears
apples.
abroad.
Apples are quite British. Yeah.
Apples.
So I definitely have
Apples
to have some
probably.
apples in there. Yeah, definitely, because I think I come across like quite
Which apples? Greens or?
British.
Green
I don't really like
sour.
green ones, so I'm gonna say not totally red, not totally green, like the mixture. Yeah.
Plums, apricots.
No. I think mangoes have to be there.
Pakistani mangoes.
Yeah,
Exotic.
Pakistani mangoes. Those have to be there because they're like the king of the fruit. You know what I mean? And they're very big, yellow and bright, and everybody likes them. I don't think everybody likes me, but you know.
You're fruity.
We're here.
Anyway,
Me, I'm not going to do fruit salad. Although in Ramadan time, for mainly Pakistani guys, Pakistanis, and I think Indians as well, even Bengalis,
Yeah.
we have a lot of fruit salad. And unfortunately, after Ramadan, we just
dash it to the
just
side.
dash it to the side.
No more fruit. No more fruit in our diet.
Sometimes in Ramadan, like we break up fast with watermelon.
Yeah.
I love honey melon and sweet melon. I love it to bits. Wallahi, it's Jannah on this earth, mashallah. Like, the fruits that you have is in this earth, man. You can't get anything better than that. No chocolate beats fruits, man. But I'm gonna stick to salad from the start, like how you have salad, like lettuce. Lettuce, like I said, I like the idea of blending in. I'm gonna take your idea on the blending in that part. I think
That's fine.
Lettuce is you have to have lettuce, yani. It's farb for the salad.
It's farb.
You have to have
You have to have lettuce.
That's the base.
Also, that I will say for the olives though, one of the reasons why I'd have olives is not just because it's the texture, but also because the Prophet ﷺ loves olives. Just loved olives. So obviously, whenever the Sahaba, whenever they noticed the Prophet loved something, they all immediately tried to love that same thing out of muhabba, out of love for the Prophet ﷺ as well. So yeah, I thought that was
Interesting.
one to mention. And tomatoes as well. I love tomatoes. Wallahi, I love tomatoes. I love cherry ones, but you know what I used to do when I was in Manchester? I used to go to the shops and I used to just buy a pack of plum tomatoes. I just eat them off raw.
No way.
I used to eat them.
That is nasty. Nah.
I
That's
can't.
different.
No, technically though, technically tomatoes are a fruit. If there are fruits,
true,
people eat fruits like that, so you
Yeah.
see it's not normal, you know. So I have plum tomatoes in there, Tesco's finest.
That's unique.
It's very unique, alhamdulillah.
And
That's good.
also a lemon, but I put mint sauce in there as well. Mint sauce mixed with yogurt,
Yeah.
and I'll put it in there as well. Inshallah.
Because why?
Yeah. I had this actually in Ramadan. Actually, I had mint sauce in there. It was really nice, man. Inshallah, mint sauce is beautiful.
Yeah, mint sauce is quite popular.
Yeah. For me, the reason why I like mint sauce is because it's like it's sweet taste to it, but it's kind of like it feels like it's luxurious and it feels like something
Savoury.
like premium, you know?
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
I'm not saying I have that in me at any shape or form, but
prestige.
I have this sort of
The premium.
But I definitely what I say is that, you know, there's a kind of like I'm searching for something premium in my life, you know. So I'm always trying to get the highest, inshallah. So
Inshallah.
obviously,
I feel like I touched at the surface of my salads.
Yeah, definitely.
no, obviously that's why I came last. I thought, I'll just copy all your ideas and then just start at the end. So yeah, I think that's a really good icebreaker. Despite
Okay, alhamdulillah. Yeah, I can see everybody's different personalities now through your salads. Sounds good.
no mint sauce jokes, please, in the future. Yeah. Whatever we said here stays in the episode. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah.
So I think a good way of kind of starting this off would be, what's your journey been like, Ismail? Like in terms of travelling, obviously that's been a key part of your kind of formative years. And how do you feel that shaped your thinking, your work ethic, and various things like that?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So in terms of my journey, I would say my journey hasn't been as straightforward, alhamdulillah, in life, just like many other people, really. I've had an experience of, and blessed by Allah, to be honest, to be able to travel outside of the UK. I was born and raised in the UK, alhamdulillah, in South London, Croydon, alhamdulillah. So that's kind of where I was born. But at the age of 12, you know, my mother made the decision to take me and my younger brothers off to Uganda. SubhanAllah, and it was such an eye-opening experience to be able to travel back. I'd been there when I was 8 already, when I was younger, but to travel back, what we say going back home. So many of the listeners who are probably around the age of probably 25, 18, 17 there can relate, where there's always one person in your classroom or whatever who's kind of been quote unquote sent back. You know, so I was the kid that disappeared and, you know, didn't come back for some years.
How many years was that?
It was 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
alhamdulillah, it was 4 years, and it was a very eye-opening 4 years. I went and I studied. In terms of my education, it was quite broad. I got to study in the Ugandan system of education, studied in a kind of primary school, Ugandan. My brother can relate. We got what they call canes, so literally getting slashed with a stick.
You both went together, right?
No, so I went in 2008 actually, so I was there for 2.5 years.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
So, yeah.
MashaAllah.
So growing up, we actually grew up in different households.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nowadays we're kind of we're living together at home.
The same. Wow.
What's it like?
That part of the journey kind of coincides.
What's it like in the Ugandan system? Is it quite strict education-wise? Like, obviously,
you just said
not just
The thing is, that's the norm.
That's natural.
That's just like,
Yeah.
okay, you'll get detention. Like,
Yeah.
You'll get detention. So here you won't get detention,
Yeah.
you get a cane, right?
is it quite competent as well, the school?
Yes, so in terms of the schooling, so you have the Ugandan National Examination Board, which is, for the most part, it's from senior 1 to senior 4. You have the primary education system, which is like 7 years. The one thing that stood out for me was that the way it transfers over here is that you'd find that year 6 to year 8 transfers as one grade over there.
Okay.
Yeah, so you do a lot of work during that period of time.
Right.
And so what that translates into is that secondary, I remember when I just got into the UNEB system for the first year, they were doing 23 subjects. That was like the minimum that you had to do. There was like wood cutting as a subject. DT, technical drawing. I remember using a protractor.
DT, yeah.
Literally, I was just using my compass for one subject. So it goes into the technicalities of things. It teaches you how to be a craftsman at whatever you're doing.
Okay.
So if you're good at physics, if you're good at chemistry, how do you apply that in your life? And how can you make that as something that is entrepreneurial in the way that you go about it? Point being, it's not a very rigid way of going about it. There's an element of cram work. That was always there because you're doing 23 subjects.
Yeah.
You're doing them in depth.
Wow.
Some of the information is quite
Was a lot of it more practical then, in terms of giving you more life skills, like using that theory and applying it?
Yes.
What was the most strangest subject?
My strangest subject.
Like
I
you
don't
would
think
know.
there was a strange subject.
As in, like, it's not normal.
Swahili. I think one of the languages that I wasn't used to using.
Swahili.
So that was quite eye-opening because there was an element of Arabic to it, and just kind of understanding what Swahili like. You wouldn't normally use this in the UK.
Is that similar for you as well?
Yes, definitely. Swahili, there's a subject that we studied in primary school called SST. So
Okay.
they combine geography,
So that's social studies.
social studies. Yeah.
wow.
Okay.
So they combine geography,
Yeah, so
history,
humanities,
Oh, that's
humanities
nice.
all into one.
Oh wow.
That's quite nice.
Okay.
So I got to learn about Ugandan history, African history in general. They teach you a lot. So for example, if you're studying history in Africa and Uganda, you learn about global history.
Okay.
They teach you about history of Europe. They teach you about history of Africa. They teach you about
Very
history of
early
Asia.
They never taught us that. I never got taught that. I got taught about Henry VIII.
And this is exactly.
That's what I had to
it's true.
reconcile when I was going back, because
Yeah.
I immediately went into East African history, and then Vasco da Gama and how he settled
Colonialism and
Oh wow.
So it was going quite deep.
Yeah.
I hadn't internalized history to this
That's
level.
proper interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another
Because, like,
question, in terms of your teachers, were they from Uganda or were they from Europe or from, UK, and they just came back to teach, to give back to the community, or was it?
I'll probably let Ismail
Yeah,
pick
yeah,
up on that first.
Yeah, so the schools I went to various schools. The ones I went to, the Ugandan kind of system, definitely the all Ugandan teachers probably live locally. When I went to the international school, I would say most of them were Ugandan, but some were from the East African region. So I also got to study at the same school as my brother. We studied in an international school where we got to do a kind of GCSEs. So there you had East African, different teachers from all around East Africa, reflective of the students as well. The students were also from abroad, the broad region.
The that you would get is that you'd have in the local examination syllabus, which is the UNEB standard, is that everyone is kind of from Uganda, basically. The majority would be from Kenya or something.
Okay.
But they wouldn't have necessarily that international aspect. They would have travelled of some form, but when you go into the international schools, there's more exposure because a lot of them have gone through the training of Cambridge examination system.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more exposure in terms of, okay, what could you be doing a degree with, basically,
Yes.
where you're going to study. South Africa, a lot of students were kind of filtering out South Africa for university, kind of moving away, Canada, the States.
UK even.
What about in terms of Muslims in Uganda and the schools that you went?
Yeah.
Was it quite a lot of Muslims there, or was it mixed Christians and?
Depends on the school you go to. So with us, the school we went to, I would say 40-60 in terms of the Muslim. The first school I went to, the primary school, and then the next one, because I went to two different primary schools. The second one, we were the minority. There wasn't that many Muslims at all. So what you have in Uganda is that you still have a strong kind of faith school community. So you will have your Catholic schools, and almost everyone in the school is Catholic. Then you have Islamic schools, and majority Muslim students. They study Arabic. So, you've got that element as well. And then you have schools that are somewhere in between as well.
Okay.
My experience for secondary, because I started in secondary, was that despite the school being mixed, not necessarily being a faith school, you had a masjid, like an actual masjid in the school. So what that did was that you had a close-knit group of Muslim students, Muslim student community. So similar to the previous episode when we were talking about ISOC, I feel like my ISOC days started well before I joined ISOC at university.
Yeah.
In fact, we had our own ISOC that wasn't turned an ISOC.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It was just that community of brothers.
So I remember just a community of brothers, and joining upon the good, and advising one another, saying, okay, are there things that you're facing in senior one that I haven't faced, or things like this. And it was just like an informal network of brothers in the community. So.
That's very interesting. You said that you left at age 12 to go to Uganda. So up until 12, you've also been living in the UK. Was it your decision to be like, I'm going to go to Uganda at age 12, or?
No. No, that was my mum's decision.
How did you feel about that in that moment when she's just like, okay,
I was distraught. I was crushed. I was like,
you can't mention that. Because it's not going to change the decision.
Yeah, exactly. You can't mention that. You got to go with the flow at that point. But what I thought it was going to be a holiday.
Is that how they phrase it?
I I knew what was happening.
My brother got the disclaimer, but I thought it was generally going to be a holiday.
Things I thought I was coming back the next year.
Yeah,
it was like a bit of
a 1 year kind of.
But that 1 year turned into 2 years.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, by that time I knew I need to finish up here and then.
Did it help you though? What do you think in hindsight, in retrospect?
Definitely it did. I think there's so many elements. So we spoke about the educational element, but also I think just the element of discovering who I am. So I feel like at the time before I left, I would say I was very confused in a sense where I didn't know who I was. If you picked me up at the time, I mean, you've already found a 12-year-old who's kind of, who knows who they are and what their purpose is. But I would say I was a bit extra confused. Why? Because of the environment that we were living in at the time. What was it cool for us to be doing? Playing around in the area, in the local area, playing around with kids, just causing a bit of trouble and stuff like that. So when I went back to Africa, I kind of realized, okay, life isn't a joke. I was seeing people who had nothing, people who were building from scratch, people who were living off the equivalent of, let's say, £2 a day, £1.50 a day, but they were the happiest people you ever meet. So I was coming with this British attitude and this kind of chip on my shoulder, meeting all these people who had very little and so grateful.
I can relate to that.
And I was humbled. I was so humbled by the experience immediately.
Well, I think a lot of us can relate to that. With our own backgrounds, and we go back to our own home countries, and we see that firsthand, and we think, wow, I thought I was all big and strong, being from UK. You have that sense of arrogance.
It's true.
I wouldn't say kibber in the sense that it's actually like, but you just assume a high standard. Yeah. And then when you go there and then you see a different form of life, different way of living, and you see the simplicity and almost the happiness that comes out of that simplicity, really does make you change your perspective. It really does.
I haven't actually been back home, man.
Haven't?
Oh, you need to do it.
Well, now you guys are making me feel like I feel small, like I need to go.
Yeah.
Not even back home. And you've been to Umrah, you see. Even the
just traveling it pretty much
so
anywhere.
You learn a lot, and I think that a lot of British people, especially Londoners. I'm actually technically outside of London. Yeah, Zone 9 is outside London.
I thought ends at Zone 6.
Yeah, exactly. Watford's got a special Zone 9.
That's a special Watford one.
One thing I will tell you guys is that Londoners don't like to travel outside London.
SubhanAllah.
They think the north is Watford. They think the north of the whole UK is everything past Watford is north. And one of the problems that you have when you don't travel, especially to your own roots, how your parents raised you and stuff, you don't get to see that other side. You really don't. You don't get to experience a different form of life. And that kind of limits your perspective, and even building your own identity, which we'll discuss later on. You will limit your own identity. Especially like, for example, even like when we start practicing at university, maybe that maybe not for you guys, but for me, I started to take my religion a lot more seriously.
Okay.
I didn't want to be Pakistani, I wanted to be Saudi Arabian, or whatever you call it. Yeah, and that's a very silly thing to say. I'll say that out loud. I can happily admit that I used to think like that. But that's because I didn't like the way my culture was. But then 2-3 years ahead, now I love my culture. I love the language. I love the I can see there's different good aspects from my own cultures. I think that maybe you could resonate with that a lot more.
Yeah.
You actually living there at that age, a very important age as well.
Yeah. I think even just, for example, something simple like going to meet your grandparents. So I don't know if it's the same, obviously, from where you're from, but for us, you got your village. So you got the town centre where we're living, which is Kampala area, and then you've got your village where your parents originally came from within the country.
And just from that perspective, that's like 150 kilometres on the other end.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you got to travel a bit, go and see the because most of us, our grandparents are still in the village where they're from. So we had to go to the village, meet the grandparents, sit down with them. That is humbling. It's like, okay, this is where I'm from. Okay, this is, because when you're here, you can make the connection with your parents and your immediate family. Yeah. But when you go back, it's like, okay, now you can really make the connection back as to where you're coming from. Right. What that does, that gives you a sense of confidence and self-belief that you didn't have before. It gives you a sense of belonging that you didn't have before. Right. Something that stays with you for the rest of your life. So, alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful for the experience.
What would you say is that sense of belonging in terms of, why would you say you didn't have it before and you found it there?
Because at the time, everyone was trying to be Jamaican. Look, before I left here, my brother, that's something within itself. And, I'm from South London, so for us, there's certain elements of being from South London. You probably hear about it, but I think, to be honest, in London in general, at that time, when we look at the youth culture, so to speak, everyone is kind of following the trends. At the time, it was being Jamaican, right? So Africans at the time were kind of...
What does that mean, though? What does that actually mean?
So and even up to now, I guess, the kind of, when we talk about the Jamaican influence on culture, worldwide, and also youth culture in the UK, they have quite an influence, especially when it comes to things like colloquialism, slang, way people dress, music. We can't deny that it's something that affects the youth of today.
Of course.
So that kind of seeps into us. So at the time, being Jamaican was something that was very influential. So, you know, the Jamaican kids were kind of having their moment in class and everything, and the Africans were kind of, you know, we would, you know, so with ourselves, it was kind of like, okay, so now, are we, who are we really? Because, okay, we've taken elements of these people's kind of slang and incorporated into our language, but at the same time, I'm Ugandan. But I don't really know what that means because I've never been there. I've just kind of know from my parents. So when I go there, when I went to Uganda, I was like, okay, this is what it means to be Ugandan. This is where I'm from. This is my country. This is my culture. These are my people. Okay, it makes sense. And a light bulb kind of went off in my mind, and that gave me the confidence now. Because now I know where I'm from. I know I have an essence of the language, and it does give you a bit of confidence, I'm sure.
What do you bring back from that experience and that confidence when you come back here after those 4 years? What does it bring for you?
It brings to you a perspective that many people who have never connected with their roots have, and that's the perspective of just knowing who you are in general. I think this is something that we underestimate, knowing who you are. Now, for a lot of people, a lot of us who were born and raised here, being British is something that we've kind of embraced and said, okay, this is who we are, and that's fine, alhamdulillah. But I think for myself, also that element of being Ugandan that I never really explored before, it gives me that sense of belonging. So when I come back, I'm able to connect with my community in a way that I wasn't able to connect with before, because I kind of understand them now, I get them now, where before I could have maybe kept myself away because I didn't really get what it means to be Ugandan.
I think it's also important in terms of the nuances of understanding where people are unable to actually actualize that. So you're able to see, okay, they're going through a journey here.
Yes.
So you need to kind of sympathize with that as well.
Exactly.
Where they actually don't feel like they're part of their culture as well.
Do you think, sorry, do you think that it, touching on something a little bit different, but do you think that experience in Uganda, now understanding you know, that other side of your identity properly and being able to communicate with that community, do you think it has an impact in your relationship with your parents?
Okay, SubhanAllah, that's a good question. Yes, most certainly, because I feel like when we were younger, our parents would tell us stories of the struggles that they went through, in terms of the journey and you know, the struggles that they went through in order to get to the UK in the first place, and also just their childhood. And yes, you can sympathize with them and empathize and listen, but if you haven't been to the country and seen actually where they've grown up and what they've been through, it's a bit hard to relate to them in that sense. Whereby, you can relate to the challenges and the experiences that they've been through, but when you can actually go and say, look, I grew up in this village and that is where I used to go and to that well and pick up the water and take it to my mother, and it's like, okay, this is the struggle that they went through in order for us to get to where we are today.
Do you think a lot of the times when they're telling you this, because you've grown up here, and all the images of what you know of over there is what you see on TV or what you see on YouTube, the way that they're explaining to you, imagining it as if what you imagine it in a movie, but then when you go there, it's not like that, is it? I'm sure it's totally different.
It's totally different.
You can see it in front of your eyes.
Exactly. You touched on the point. That's exactly it.
I think
you see the reality.
These discussions that we're having is actually very important to have on a podcast, first and foremost. I think that when our listeners or our viewers are watching this, it's important to understand that our own backgrounds play a huge part in developing who we truly are. Because it's like a trickle-down effect, you know, like if they come from, let's say, our parents or our grandparents who are migrants, and they brought their cultures into this country, and they assimilated to a certain degree, they integrate to a certain degree, but they kept certain cultures, and we just get to see the mixture of that integration. We don't get to see the core. We don't get to see the core. We don't go back. We don't deduct from that. We don't go backwards to see how it actually trickled down. And so when you do go back, it's almost as if you're putting the pieces to the puzzle. So I think that's really interesting. I think that, and also as well, if the other day, one of a scholar and a teacher from Birmingham, I won't give his name, mashallah, he was talking about, and he's Nigerian himself, Sheikh, and he was talking about how you know, when he accepted Islam, a lot of the Nigerian brothers they were hanging around with Jamaat al-Tabligh.
I just watched this morning, actually. I literally just watched
Yeah,
it
and
this
he was
morning.
talking about how they would nod their heads because the Jamaat al-Tabligh would nod their heads. And he's saying that it's harmless, you know, it's harmless just to nod your head, but they were realizing they were trying to assimilate to that crowd of Muslims.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he was saying that you should just be yourself, you know.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that your culture is accepted in Islam, and I think that even the previous episode we had with Ustad Khalid, or that's actually the second previous episode.
No.
I've really missed it. Also,
I felt like your points were touching upon that.
yeah, so I think that, inshallah, I think we're living in a very diverse place, and if people like yourself and people like Muhammad, and even obviously you need to go back to Pakistan for a while as well. But we need to just travel, inshallah, and maybe just revisit our roots a bit more, and maybe that might just make us appreciate just being what Muslim is like to be Muslim in the UK and stuff like that. Inshallah. What's the next section?
So if we kind of look at the things that you've discussed, when you were going through the education system, probably the first thing I'd ask would be, in terms of work ethic, how did that change for you? Did you have a specific structure of work ethic beforehand? And also just on the idea of decolonisation of the mind. You're going back to a region which has historically been been the hotbed of the British Empire.
Yes.
And so how did that reconcile with you? Like, did you feel like you were able to make the dots connected, or like what happened there for you in terms of the mindset?
No. So leaving here, I'll openly admit this. I wasn't the smartest kid in the class. I was bottom set for pretty much everything. So I was struggling a bit academically while I was still in the UK. When I went over there to Uganda, I got pulled back some years. So that's what they do. If you don't kind of meet the cut, they pull you back. So I was meant to be going into the equivalent of year 8. I got pulled back to the equivalent of year 5.
Does that mean that their kind of education is much more advanced?
Yeah, much more.
And so the point that I made earlier about you've got the 7 tiers for primary.
Yeah.
P7 to senior 1 is equivalent to our year 6. Technically, even year 5. Year 5 to
year 8.
Year 8.
Yeah.
Year 8.
So
Okay.
like so I left when I was going into year 9. So I had a bit of transition there.
Did they help you as well?
Helped me a lot. That 1 year in the local examination syllabus changed my work ethic.
Alhamdulillah.
Like, the spark was always there, but I was just kind of getting involved in the wrong. It's kind of a bit of a teacher's pet. I was a bit of everything in the class.
Yeah.
But I knew what I needed to do. So when I go home, I'd always get okay, are you doing your work? So for that, it was just like, okay, I need to focus now. So yeah.
What about yourself?
It's gratitude, because the school that I went to, there's so many. So you go into this class, there's 40, 50 people in a class. It's packed. There's so many people in the class.
90.
Wow.
And at the end of every term, they'd rank you according to grades. You would know where you were.
You'd know where you are.
Wow.
Out of 90.
Some schools do that, but 90 people.
And your parents always want you to be top 10 as well. So
How do
you
you even get the teachers' help?
yeah, you got to go for that. You got out of the lessons, you have to go to the teacher, find them, and
That's
people make it
adab,
work.
isn't it?
You know, you
That's
make
adab.
it. If you're serious, you make it work. So I think for me, it's just I saw the appreciation that the Ugandan people had for education, and that kind of influenced me within myself as well. So for example, when you're that age, or 12, most people in the class are 12, 11, 10. All right, there's always that element of joking around and playing around. But there's this underlying seriousness and appreciation for education that I saw.
Okay.
And that really woke me up, because when I was in England, the way it was is that everyone kind of acted a certain way. I mean, people mostly acted as if the teacher owed them something. People would be playing around. It took teachers a bit of time to settle the class down. But there, as soon as the teacher started writing on the board, you'd see everyone kind of sitting up, and it was like, wow, I've never seen this sort of love for education.
Wow.
And that influenced me immediately. So that just kind of created a switch within me as well. So I became serious now. So,
The mindset, you know.
What do you think it is over there that makes them so serious about it?
one, you're paying for it. So, this is, you're paying for it. I mean, the parents are really working hard to put school fees on the table there and
I'll be
pay.
honest, as much as I think about that question, I think it's the fact that you're living in an environment where education is probably your biggest outlet into the world.
Yes.
Like, obviously now it's changing with globalization, everyone's connected and so forth.
Yeah.
Yes.
But really and truly, it is down to the fact that very few distractions.
It's a ticket to a better life.
Basically,
Yes.
yeah. There is an element of that.
Asians do think like that too.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been internalized, but the fact that you're in an environment where education, kind of succeeding in education is kind of the way forward. There isn't. That's the norm.
But how does that deal? Sorry to interject. How does that deal with decolonizing the mind and stuff like that?
Yeah. So in terms of what
with the work ethic.
in the work ethic, first of all, then also what you're studying. So as I mentioned before, I was studying this topic of social studies. So
Yeah.
we're studying history. Now, this is history that we studied here, like what you mentioned before, King Henry, Tudors, etc. So now I'm studying about global history.
Right.
I'm studying about colonialism. I had no idea what colonialism was.
Yeah.
I'm studying about African history. I'm studying about Europe. I'm studying about the world in a way that I hadn't studied about it before. This is opening up my mind.
How old are you going to be studying this?
How old was I?
Yeah.
Probably about 13,
Okay.
13, 12.
Teaching all that already at such an age.
Yeah, I know. They start young.
So the one thing I noticed as
Yeah.
well, by kind of the education has no age at this point.
Yeah.
And it really is, as long as you have an aql and
Yeah.
are able to internalize that, they really make it clear to you that you can actually do that.
I think I've noticed this myself, like even within our own cultures, me and Asim being Pakistani, that here in England, they kind of allow the immaturity of children to go on for a very much
Yes.
longer time
Yes.
period than you may see in our culture. In our culture, that immaturity is cut off like,
Quick.
like 13, 14, like you have to do things for your parents that, you know, elder people do. You have to go out and find your job. You have to go do this and that and whatever. And I think growing up here, that kind of thing gets lost. I know in my own family, even though I say that in the Pakistani culture is like that, even within my own family, that kind of idea of trying to make sure that the young person is mature from a young age is getting lost because we're growing up here. And I think the main thing over here is kind of, you have to wait till you hit that 18 until you can actually be a proper adult, but it really comes earlier than that.
It's not really.
But did you find a conflict between that? Like sometimes like you'd be at school and you'd be chilling with your mates and and then you come home and all of a sudden it's so serious.
Yeah,
Did you
there's a
find
big
that?
switch.
Did you find that a problem? Did you how did you deal with that?
I think it's good. I think about it really. Let's let our guests talk about that because I think
It's interesting. Though. It's interesting.
You can answer.
okay, so for that, so you come home and the switch would be different. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all about. It's a bit more serious.
By the way.
It's a bit.
Definitely. Definitely.
It's a bit more serious. It's a bit like you've got more responsibility.
mashallah.
Your the respect levels as well. The way you might respect your teachers, as you were saying, over here, like if they owe you something. But when you're at home, the culture is different. You have to respect your parents, your older brother, older sister. You call them by a different name. You don't say their name.
No.
You know, you call them by something else. For example, in our culture, if it's an elder brother, you call him Bai.
Yes.
You would have to say that. Even if you say him name, you have to say Bai after. Or Baijan or whatever it may be, But in school, like amongst your friends and things, like, it's a totally different thing.
Totally
so
different.
there is that shift. I think that's kind of, sorry, I overtook you. But
No, that was really important.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, on that point, that's very key, that switch. I mean, we always had an element of that even before we went to Uganda, but you didn't really, I mean, you were told you need to do these things and, you know, you need to show respect, but it was kind of like, you know, you just don't listen really, you know, just being a bit stubborn and everything. But then going back to Uganda and seeing the importance of respecting your elders, just that kind of within itself, the elder is kind of upheld within the society. For example, you go to Uganda, we don't really have care homes, you know. Elders are looked after, elders are respected, you know, your parents, your grandparents, you make sure that once you've kind of passed through the education system, you look after them, and, you know, so that kind of element as well, that also kind of inspired me when I was in school. But I remember before you were asking me, so, you know, what kind of, what was the switch in terms of making me become serious about education? One thing I mentioned was obviously the element of paying for the education, but also kind of looking around and seeing the struggles of the kids around me. So the first school I went to, it was, I would say it was a lot of the demographic of the students, they were from quite poor backgrounds. So for them, they might have been the only one in their family going to school. And when they tell you stories of what they got to do back home, when they go back home and they've got to work and they've got to do this and that, it really does kind of make you appreciate a bit more. Even though I was quite young, you know, being around these other students as well and seeing kind of the poverty they were going through, it inspired me as well to kind of take my education a bit more seriously because, you know, I should be grateful to be here, you know.
One thing I was going to touch upon, obviously with this concept of decolonizing the mind.
Yes.
And through understanding what the education system is giving you. What did you find in terms of the Ugandan students, obviously, that you were studying with? What kind of preconceptions do they have about Britain or a British student or a Ugandan growing up in that environment? Because that is part and parcel. I knew that was part and parcel of just being there, and I had to reconcile the fact that okay, technically I'm not as British as I was now, being with you guys, and I just want to be here.
Yes.
I want to be part of this. So
when I went to Uganda, I thought I would just kind of be accepted with open arms.
Yeah.
I thought that, you know, when I get there, it's going to be like, welcome back.
Yeah, they see you, you're like, you look like them.
Yes,
so
it's just like, yay, our guy, you know.
Yeah, they're waiting at the airport as well. Ismail.
Yeah. It wasn't quite like that. I mean, regarding our family, immediate family, I think they received you well, alhamdulillah. But when it came to, I guess, the people in general, as soon as you opened your mouth to speak with your British accent, it was like, whoa! Like, you could see the shock on their faces.
I could understand Luganda, the actual, like, the main language.
Yeah.
But the accent that I was using to speak Luganda, as if I was fake.
Okay.
Or I didn't actually...
That's like us with Urdu, isn't it?
Well, let me tell you a story. When I went to Pakistan, with my granddad, he had own businesses over here and everything. Inshallah. He did really well for himself. So he knows how to sell and he knows how to buy. Yeah. So when I went to get cricket bat, I wasn't allowed to speak. I wasn't allowed to even I wasn't allowed to do anything, just wait outside. Because if I mentioned anything, they would have bumped up the price.
SubhanAllah. This point, I can relate to that so much. SubhanAllah.
Prisoner.
I know.
I was like, look, let me at least try and improve my language.
I know how to speak.
Yeah.
I remember a funny story. So we just arrived. I don't know whether my grandma knew whether I could speak Luganda, but she was conversing, and I remember my brother and I were seated on the table there, and we're just eating away. She was like, these guys don't understand Luganda at all, and I said, Ginger, I understand Luganda.
She said it in their language, isn't it? Think you didn't understand.
But you can't speak it as well, but you can understand it.
Yeah.
I'm the same.
Yeah, same.
There's a saying like Samajati looking, but like I understand it.
But now that's totally changed, of course.
Yeah.
Obviously, we immerse ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So, so you have to remind me, track of thought.
So obviously going back to Uganda, being accepted with open arms.
Yes. So it was, you know, this element of, it's mixed reactions. So there's always that element of shock because obviously they see you look just like them, but the way you're speaking is like, you know, you're speaking different. You're speaking British.
I mean,
so it's like
some terminologies, muzungu.
So they call you muzungu, which means like white person. It's one of the you know, it's like an element.
Went back, that changed up to
Abasama. So Abasama means there's people who come from Uganda who just go during the summer.
Right.
So they use that word Abasama just to kind of describe you. So it's you know, you get that element and it's like, okay, so now for you, you don't know how you're going to be received. So but then, so am I, because I in my mind, I'm coming back home. I'm meant to be kind of, but you guys are acting a bit strange. So kind of what's going on here? So now you've got a choice. You can continue with your British accent and kind of navigate like that.
It's going to be very difficult for you.
It's going to be a long journey. Or you can start trying to adapt now and kind of edit certain things, learn the slang, learn the language, pick up the accent a bit and start switching up slightly. And that's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
At that point, you really enjoy the experience. You understand why you're here now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You understand, okay, this is a process now. And then you can start building. You can really start building. But
So at this point, did you start to change your mind from when you were leaving? You were like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to go. I want to stay back in the UK. To now, it's kind of changed, and it's like I know what I'm doing here now.
Definitely, I feel like those first 2 years being in the Ugandan education system, that was like. It was quite tough, but it was that kind of that transitional period. The last 2 years when I went to the international school, so we got to meet a lot of people from all across Africa who were, I would say, quite wealthy. So very opposite to the first schools that I went to. The kids there were quite wealthy, quite well off. Their parents were politicians, diplomats and all of this. So they had come from all around. Some of them had even come from England like us, and they've gone to study there. So now...
So there's also a preconception that British students were very unruly.
Exactly.
Misbehaved.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they were just saying they're daft. Like they genuinely don't.
Right.
When we went to that school, and we could see it a lot, even to the point where the head teacher kind of picked up on it, that a lot of the British students that were going there were not really serious about education. So in a sense, they were kind of quote unquote getting sent back as well, and then kind of being dumped in that school. So there was always this thing that if you're British, you're not really serious about education. It's a stereotype. Right. So that pushes you to want to kind of disprove that and work harder. So, you know, all these stereotypes kind of existed, but to be honest, I didn't really let it get to me as much. I just tried to put my head down as much as I can, and obviously we studied and got through the GCSEs. And by the time I left anyway, obviously I was looking forward to coming back to England and everything, because I did a 4-year stretch just straight without coming back for any holiday or anything. But you know, it was I knew I was going to kind of miss the environment, and I'd learned quite a lot, but I didn't understand. Now looking back in hindsight, that was probably one of the best decisions that my mum made, kind of to take us back, because it really did give me an experience and an eye-opening experience that I don't think anything else could have given me, that living in this country, or just any program or experience. Only going back to live in Uganda and those 4 years and studying at those schools and experiencing that could have given me the experience that kind of helped to boost me when I came here and get involved in some of the things I'd later get involved in.
With the I mean, the things that you studied over there, and the kind of work ethic as well that you explained.
Yes.
Obviously, when we're living here, we kind of have an idea that, oh, England has the best education, and we study, you know, everything that needs to be studied is studied here, and we know everything. Whereas obviously you're explaining, it's another story. Out in Uganda, they have quite more advanced education system over there, and the students are much more advanced in their work ethic and everything like that. And in terms of the things that you're studying, you're saying it's a global history, whereas over here, it's very narrow. So what would you take from in Uganda and the education system there in terms of syllabus, in terms of work ethic, and all those kind of things? What would you wish to take over here and could implement over here?
Yes. So what I would take is, I guess, the global approach to education. The fact that in Uganda, when we're speaking about topics like geography and history, especially, they're not limited to just the country. They're so wide. You learn about everything. I'd love to bring that over here to the UK, because I feel like for a lot of youth here, it would open up their eyes to the world. You know, I feel like you don't really get that unless maybe you go off to university and study history deeper, or geography. But at secondary level, you know, you're studying about the Tudors, and that's great, but you want to know what's going on in the world.
Especially after the fact that there are so many cultures living in UK. We are entitled for a more comprehensive education. With all respect to the Victorians, and you want to know about, you know, British Empire, and it's very important to know that.
But
it's just that we're missing a huge part of history. It's only going to lead to a huge compound ignorance.
Exactly.
And I think on that point, actually, just to interject, knowing that there are flaws in what you're learning as well. What you're learning is not 100% foolproof. I think that's probably the most important point, even in this. Are you told that? Or are you going to have to just find that out yourself? Because I think that's the key point when it comes to understanding that the education that you've had, okay, there are actually some flaws to some of the theories. These are theoretical things. Like, I'm not saying that conspiracy theories behind them, but you need to understand that there are different perspectives to the story.
Also, how, you know, we're talking about decolonizing the mind. If you have a very wide syllabus, as you've mentioned, I'm sure a lot of the British people growing up, they will not look at Muslims the same way. You know?
It's true.
They won't look at the Muslims the same way because they're learning about their history.
So true,
And a lot of history is never like, it's not one thing happens and another thing happens like after consequence. It's simultaneous. There's multiple things happening on a monumental scale, and they all play a huge part.
And there's a theory that appreciating a community's history actually allows that community to be integrated much more easily. That's one of the things, for example, and we mentioned this before, that I work at MEND, that we're trying to do is teach some things about history of Muslims in the UK, so that, you know, the 95% of Britain that is non-Muslim can actually understand, appreciate that Muslims have been here and what contributions they've given, and it makes easier to have that conversation between Muslims and non-Muslims in the UK. Excellent point.
Alhamdulillah.
What's the next point?
So the point about identity that we touched on earlier.
We've been talking about that the whole time, I think.
So more specifically here towards Muslim youth identity. So it's not just the identity in general.
Muslim youth,
How do you feel like everything up until now? How has that shaped you as a Muslim? And obviously that transition, becoming more practicing and reconciling with who you are as a Muslim as well.
Alhamdulillah. So you know, I feel like this is a very key topic because this plays a big role in my own journey and how I got to where I am today. So alhamdulillah, I would say for most of my life, and to be honest, even now, I don't say I'm perfect level, but for a lot of my kind of youth, I wasn't kind of practicing Islam as much as I could have been. I didn't really take Islam something that's serious, and the reason why was because not knowing who I was. I feel like at the time I was very confused, especially before I went to Uganda. I was very confused. I didn't know who I was. Am I British? Am I Muslim? Am I Ugandan? Am I Londoner? Am I a South Londoner? You know, there's so many kind of elements of who I was, and I just didn't know which one I was. I didn't know which one to pick. All of them I felt like were kind of, and there was no one who kind of sat me down and said, okay, this is who you are. Don't get me wrong. We went to the masjids, you know, Jummah, you're praying. Khamsa salawat, you were trying your 5 daily prayers, but it wasn't, that conversation hadn't really happened for myself. So I kind of had to discover it through experience, through traveling to Uganda and everything. But, you know, that played a big element as to why I didn't embrace my Islamic identity at a young age, just generally not knowing who I was, really. And that was the reality for me at the time.
Do you think partially that, on this topic specifically, I think all of us here grew up in a very unusual time.
No.
You know, like I was in year 3 when the 9/11 bombings took place, and the 7/7 bombings took place, and all of these kind of these events took place in our childhood, and that must have had a huge impact on embracing our own identity, at least
without a shadow of a doubt.
With that khams salawat and the beard and whatever you classify as identity.
Even further ahead.
Yeah.
5 when 7/7 happened.
Yeah, 7/7.
Subhanallah.
I think it has a huge impact on Muslims in terms of what they want to choose to be part of their own identity.
Subhanallah. I remember having an experience in secondary school when I was in year 7 at the time, and we were sitting in class, and subhanallah, obviously at the time we're getting a lot of propaganda. After 9/11, we saw so much media propaganda against the Muslims, like an insurge, like a complete, subhanallah, it was just crazy at the time. But this was around about, I'll say 2007 anyway. So you're still getting all of that. And I was sitting in class, and there was a brother, Hamza, who I used to sit next to in maths. May Allah preserve him. I mean, he's a good brother. But, you know, I was sitting next to him in class, and there were these guys, basically these guys didn't know that I was Muslim, right? So they were picking on Hamza, and they were saying, there was this rumor going around that Hamza is going to blow up the school on Friday. I think it was around about Wednesday.
Right.
And people were genuinely scared.
No way.
Like, literally, people were genuinely scared that, you know, and they were like, you know, I might not come in, am I going to come in? And they were coming up to me and say, are you going to come in? And at that time, I look back now, I was young, so maybe I shouldn't go too hard on myself, but maybe I should have spoken up for Hamza. But because I was fearful myself, like, is this kind of backlash going to come onto me as well? I didn't join in the bullying, but I just kind of kept quiet, you know, knowing that I'm a Muslim as well. Exactly. Knowing that I'm a Muslim, I probably should have stood up for him. I should have, but subhanAllah, that's how it was at the time, where if you're, you know, Muslim in school, and, you know, a lot of our young brothers and sisters are going through it right now as well, it's not easy, subhanAllah, it's not easy. But, you know, that thing about identity and what you just said about, because of the kind of media perception and what we're seeing now, wanting to kind of separate yourself from that whole, being a Muslim in general, because of what you're seeing,
or
and
least
not
as at least outwardly Muslim.
exactly.
I think certain communities do a lot better at that, where they outwardly do not show any sign of religiosity. I'm not basing it on fiqh opinions that the beard is not fard or stuff like that, but because of their own countries, what they faced with their own leaders, you know, and it kind of forced them. So when they came over here, they had a very similar mindset. And I think certain communities have learned to deal with that better. Whether that's a good thing or not is a different discussion of itself. But it's very interesting. I think that, you know, you had a lot to talk about identity as well. I think you mentioned to me about crime as well. And how that has an impact.
So because of the area that we were raised in, we were exposed to many things. As I said, a lot of the kind of the culture at the time and what was going on, a lot of the youth, especially the young men in the area, general, Muslim or non-Muslim, felt like they had a point to prove, whereby we had this issue with quote-unquote gangs. I wouldn't really call it gangs. It's just, you know, young people with kind of looking for themselves and searching for identity, trying to find that in something. So if they don't find it within their community, they kind of go looking for it in this kind of group of friends, and it kind of develops like that. So we were exposed to that, you know, that environment where we would go out and we would see these guys with nice cars, nice clothes, nice trainers. We were young, we were 12 at the time, very young, 11, but we were inspired by that sort of thing.
Immediately, straight away.
Exactly. So this kind, we were kind of drawn to that, and these were the quote unquote the cool people at the time. You know, as teenagers or as young people, we know that we're quite influenced by what's popular, you know, and it's something that we see a lot today with social media. But at the time, social media wasn't really big.
And what pleases the eye as well. You see that,
exactly.
That's something tangible.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So when you add on that, then also you add on the confusion with not knowing who you are, it's easy to get drawn into this environment. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy to say that I didn't go too deep into it, but I was around kind of the wrong crowd and being around that. Aspects of it influenced me, you know. SubhanAllah, especially a love for the whole music culture, and it's something that's affecting a lot of Muslims even up to today. But for myself, the problem with music, the issue there is that it starts to kind of influence your ideology and what you think about the world. You know, SubhanAllah, it's you know, some of the scholars speak about how music increases hypocrisy within the heart. Because as a Muslim, you know, there's certain things that are, you know, unacceptable within your religion. When you listen to a song and the beat is good and everything's good, you're kind of nodding along to these things that are kind of contradictory to your religion. So in essence, so we were influenced by all of these things, and SubhanAllah, you know, over time, it took some time, but alhamdulillah, over time we got to realize that, okay, maybe there's another way.
Where would you say, because it's difficult to say that this is the moment it happened for you.
Yes.
Where's the transition? Where was the juncture phase for you, where you feel like, okay, I can own my identity as a Muslim youth?
Yeah.
And hopefully at some point I should be able to share this story to benefit people and inspire people.
Yeah.
Which obviously
Are this regarding the fact that he's spoken word and how he's found that compromise? Is that what
Yeah.
you're asking?
Well, it's just more the kind of this, how did you become more aware of your Muslim identity now?
Yes.
And
Like
be able to own it.
reconciling all those different labels. You said Uganda, Muslim, London.
Okay.
Where did it reconcile?
Yeah.
So the other stuff is obviously secondary after that.
Alhamdulillah. Interestingly enough, it wasn't a moment, but there was multiple moments. So for example, when I went to Uganda, we had a teacher, our mother got us a teacher to teach us about Quran, and there's a way that he would teach us about Islam, and he gave us this pride. You know, he would teach us about the stories of the prophets. I specifically remember studying when I was about 13, sitting down, and he would teach us about the story of the prophets, and that gave me a sense of pride, because when you're young, who do you look up to? Mainly, okay, for example, superheroes or your video game characters or whatever, wrestlers, whatever it was for you. But now you're studying about Adam alayhi salam, you're studying about Jesus, peace and blessings be upon. So it's like, oh, like these guys these are now my superheroes,
right.
And that was kind of like a switch, but I didn't say I changed like immediately, but it was a seed that was planted in my mind. You know,
So you said
earlier on.
Essentially, it was the prophets.
The prophets.
That inspired you to kind of bring everything together.
Yes. And it was that, because I feel for me, I was just looking for a superhero. I was just looking for role models.
Okay.
I was looking for role models, and I think now, kind of looking back at it now,
Fantastic.
that was what I was searching for when I was young, just role models.
Actually, you know what?
And when
That's
I found
such a good point.
Yeah.
Because I think that relates to everyone here.
Yeah.
Role models, essentially, when you've actually, like, wallahi, when I was in my first year, the Freshers Fair, they gave us this small seerah booklet.
Yeah. SubhanAllah.
It's about Muhammad sallallahu
Alayhi salam.
Wallahi, I read that.
Yeah.
Open your eyes.
It was one of the most pivotal moments.
Was there one with pictures in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got pictures in it.
Yeah, I got that one as well. The same exact thing happened to me. When I read that, it opened up my eyes.
SubhanAllah. How old were you when you read it?
I was too late.
Like 17, 18.
Alhamdulillah, better late than never, you know.
Yeah, much later than you. Much later.
SubhanAllah.
It's good, mashallah.
Yeah.
I think that's actually, you know what, having discussions like this,
Yeah.
wallahi, it's very good to hear, like, to have my own views validated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Same. That's what I've been thinking this whole episode, I've been thinking, wow, subhanAllah, there is so many other Muslims that are experiencing the same exact things in different arenas. Obviously, as a black person traveling to Uganda, it's different to how me and Asim, maybe we experience our Pakistani culture mixed within Islam, but that there is that understanding of uniformity of ideas within that.
Yes. Yeah.
SubhanAllah, yeah. You were saying in terms of reconciling these things, and you mentioned earlier you never had a conversation about this before. It's more about your experiences. But do you think it's necessary for the youth to have conversations about these kind of different identity labels, or do you think it has to happen through experience?
SubhanAllah. That's such a good question. Obviously, as we look back in hindsight, so the young people kind of going through this confusion right now who might be listening, but you know, I feel like it's a bit of both. I feel it's our responsibility as people who've not saying that we're anything special, but who've maybe seen a bit, to kind of reach back now to the youngers who we can see are maybe kind of going through that journey, and have have a kind of real conversation with them and let them know that what you're going through is perfectly normal. We went through that. This confusion of
beyond that as well, recognizing that you're going through it.
Recognizing
Something needs to be done about it.
Yeah.
On a more deeper level, sorry to interject you, because I feel like that what you're saying is repeated a lot. But I want to get into more detail with that. So like you say you want to have a conversation.
Yeah.
What kind of conversation are you going to have? Do you want them to go through the exact same problems you want to go through?
No.
Or do you want them to just miss it completely?
Yeah.
Do you have to go through that yourself? Do you have to go through that pain of confusion or that serious pain that you feel?
Yeah.
You don't know how and why you're feeling that pain?
Or are you just preparing them for the fact that they're going one way, they're going to go through something similar?
How can we holistically, in a long-term scale as well, how can we avoid these kind of problems?
Yeah.
Because those 3, 4 years, 5 years of you missing out on your own personal growth, if you don't deem that as your personal growth,
yes,
that's a huge amount.
I think 1 year or 2 years gap missed out in the team is quite critical.
Yes.
Quite critical in the development. We can see it now. That people have kind of missed out that phase, and maybe they're playing a bit of catch up.
Yeah. Sadly, sorry, one I spoke before you answered the question. Sadly, there are a lot of youth, and this is the sad part, that they get back to their roots about 30, 40, a bit late.
Subhanallah.
And they're the ones who are telling us, if only I had listened to the advice at young age.
Yes.
That's when we know it's not just a conversation.
Yeah.
But maybe the conversation is starting, but what is there we could do for these kind of people? And ourselves as well,
This is very important.
Yes. Yes.
What do you think? What do you say for that?
I can speak for I guess, in terms of the youth who I'm around, or, we talk about the inner city London, everyday young person who's kind of going to school or whatever. The way I try is, if I'm ever kind of get an opportunity to speak to them, is always kind of, first of all, trying to relate to them. That doesn't mean I sacrifice my values. That means I have to understand their language, right? So it's languages, and I was speaking to my brother about this at some point, is that languages are powerful, right? We've got this thing where we're from, it's called code switching. I don't know if you've heard of it, but whereby we, for example, we speak how we speak, colloquial, kind of language. When we pick up the phone in that interview, I'm sounding like Prince Charles, so.
I heard a lot of us have that.
So I'm sure you guys can relate. So that doesn't mean that you're sacrificing who you are. It just means that you need to different languages for different audiences. So we need to learn what is the language that the youth understand, right? And then we need to develop our message. So what is the message that we want to give to them? Whether it's trying to bring them back to the deen, alhamdulillah, we can. That doesn't mean we sacrifice the deen or we switch up the deen. No, alhamdulillah, the deen is complete. But you can deliver it in a language that they understand, and that will inspire them, because they're thinking, okay, this deen thing is for me as well. Islam is for me as well. Alhamdulillah, I didn't know. I thought you had to be in a phobe, turban on, but I can be, a Muslim as well, and be proud of it, and still be who I am. But alhamdulillah, I can still do that. So I think it's our responsibility to kind of switch, code switch. Code switch. Yeah, you can search it up, because
that is my life.
a lot of speech therapists use that code switching thing. So
Umar radiallahu anh, I think it was one of the Sahabi radiallahu anh, he mentioned that you should be playful with your wives, for example. Like when you're at work, you're doing your thing, like, but then you have to speak to your wife. You can't speak to her wife like she's the CEO of the house.
Or like she's your student and you're a scholar.
That's the advice I got.
Some people do that, unfortunately. They haven't learned.
Oh yes.
They're like a sheikh with their wife, yeah?
They're basically a sheikh with their wife. You have to speak like that.
Subhanallah.
And that goes back to culture in the sense that you have to speak to youth in a way that they understand.
I think that's something that you're trying to do now in terms of some of your poetry and things like that. Do you want to go a little bit into like what are you doing to kind of relate to the youth through your poetry?
And I think just wrapping up on that point, there's obviously the issue of when you're delivering messages to the youth, there is a tendency to deliver everything you want to say to the youth.
Yes.
It becomes like an overwhelmed. They're like, what on earth is happening? And just log out.
All your insecurities, all your anger.
So obviously linking into your work.
Yes.
How do you reconcile with that point, and with everything that you're doing? How do you deliver your messages in a way that sound bites, is digestible.
Alhamdulillah. So for myself, in terms of my background, I started off, unfortunately, like many other youth, I started off rapping.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. You know,
American accent or British?
a bit of both, man. You know,
There's a bit of a funny thing in school, like they'd say your younger brother's doing stuff. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Now we were.
And I wasn't that kind of guy.
Yeah.
So.
I think everyone's experienced this.
SubhanAllah, we have everyone has their thing that they're doing. You know, it's not something they would really tell people, but
Escapism essentially.
Yeah. So for us, that was one of the languages that we spoke at the time. It was through music, right? It was something that we saw as an outlet or whatever. So, you know, at the time I used to rap. So creative writing wasn't something that I was a stranger to anyway. So when I kind of came to that realization and that awakening that obviously within Islam, that this is something that isn't permissible, I thought, subhanAllah, what can I do now? Because obviously...
You dropped it?
Yeah, so I dropped it. I left it. Alhamdulillah, I walked away from that industry. It wasn't easy. I had a tough conversation with my dad, alhamdulillah, and asked Allah to preserve him. He was very realistic with me, and he told me, he gave me the evidences and he laid it out for me, you know, and he told me, look, this is what Islam says. Now it's down to you now to go and kind of reflect. It wasn't easy, because this is something that I had a passion for.
Yeah.
Your whole life.
Yeah, I loved it so much, and anyone who's in that industry, you'd see it.
I had very, very similar experiences with
SubhanAllah.
music. It was a big, big, big passion of mine.
Even as a listener.
Yeah, as a listener.
You develop a love for it.
Yeah.
So,
on a side note before you continue, I think one thing about Shu'aib, mashallah, is that despite that, when Shu'aib did try a different way of life, he had the ability to do some khair with that same equipment that he had. And actually that helped. Wallahi, as soon as we had Shu'aib in the team, the organization went from like this to like this. You know, he had the equipment. It was straight away. So mashallah, Allah
preserve him.
Allah uses people like you. Allah uses people who have that creative side, and if you had that past, wallahi, even the Sahaba, some of them had different. Like Amr ibn As was a leader. Like he was a visionary. He was incredibly good at speaking. Yes. You know. And when he accepted Islam, they used him like that. And Suhail ibn Amr as well, one of the seniors of the Quraysh, when he eventually accepted Islam, the Prophet complimented him and praised him before he actually came to accept. He said, why is he not Muslim yet? You know, a person of his lineage, a person of his nobility. So it's like you have these qualities, everyone has qualities.
Putting them forth.
Yeah, it's like you replacing those things that you're doing bad with it, and putting it in the right limelight. You know, for it to be used in a positive way, and I think that you're doing something like that right now, isn't it?
Yeah, carry on, bro.
SubhanAllah, whenever, just a side point, whenever I reflect on some of the past experiences, SubhanAllah, it just makes me reflect on Allah's mercy. Because really and truly, SubhanAllah, if you had kind of spoken to me 10 years ago, SubhanAllah, and I'm not saying because I'm probably still ignorant now, but I wouldn't have imagined myself sitting here with you guys doing this sort of thing. So subhanAllah, for me, it's always a reflection, and we need to be grateful to Allah for all the opportunities that we have and everything that He's blessed us with, you know, and alhamdulillah. So anyways, you know, it was something that I was so kind of indulged in, and I always thought, okay, so what can I reconcile here? And spoken words. So what I did, I just took off the beat. I kept the words, alhamdulillah, and you know, what we had left was poetry.
Took off the beat, kept the words.
Yeah, took away the beat, I kept the words, and what we had left was poetry.
So you're a sha'ir, you're a poet.
It's far from it. more.
I read something interesting in an article. You don't like to call yourself a poet.
No, it isn't a label that I embrace. To be honest, I wouldn't, because when I think about some of the poets, like for example, some of the scholars, you know, Imam Shafi'i's famous poem, and so these are poets. SubhanAllah. Me, I'm just, you know, someone who writes every now and then, but these are the poets. People able to use language to inspire people and to draw people to Islam, and these are poets. I think for myself, alhamdulillah, just someone who kind of writes every now and then.
You hope to be like that, though?
Inshallah. Inshallah.
What have you sort of done so far that has been able to relay that message to the youth?
Yeah, so I think for myself, it's been I've been able to write a book called The Lost Essays Anthology Poetry Collection. SubhanAllah.
I was looking. I saw the documentary. Yeah. He's got the physical copy.
I thought it was
just uncover it. Just
If you had told me it was that, I would have believed it. But you could have convinced me.
Lost essays is
You could have convinced me that the design was meant to be like that. You know?
SubhanAllah.
Put it in the wash for a bit.
Yeah.
You know, we're keeping up to the name. I mean, the lost essays, you kind of lost them at the moment, but alhamdulillah.
They'll be found.
You know, it's not here. It's not here.
Shall I put is it for sale?
Alhamdulillah, so it's available on Amazon.
Okay, so we'll put a link inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Jazakallah khair. So it's available on Amazon. I wrote it when I was at university, alhamdulillah. So at the time anyway, and this links into the previous topic about decolonizing education.
Yeah.
At the time I was at university, I was studying politics and social policy. Right?
Oh, that was your undergrad?
Now.
Oh, wow.
That's what I was studying. So at the time I had a passion for politics. I haven't really even gone into that whole kind of side of, I had a journey with that, with the whole political field, but I had a passion for politics, you know.
Now I can see that.
At the time.
It's all making sense now.
Yeah.
That was your undergrad. Okay.
SubhanAllah. At the time, I wanted to kind of be a politician and study that, and I wanted to be the Prime Minister, I'll be honest with you. That was my kind of thing at the time.
Right.
So that was my mindset. And I'd visited number 10 Downing Street on that same year. More David Cameron, but Boris, you know, SubhanAllah. But at the time, that was kind of like, that was me. I was very deep into that field.
Wow, okay.
So I was studying it, and basically, I thought that university was going to be this eye-opening experience. I thought I was going to go sit down and learn everything about life, and just, because from the way it was hyped up and from what I see people leave, I was like, this is what I was expecting. And I went and I was quite disappointed in a sense where I went and I was studying this kind of quote-unquote Eurocentric syllabus. Also, I was going through a lot of challenges with myself in terms of my kind of relationship with my dean. And this is something that we underestimate when people, especially who go outside of London for university.
Leeds is a difficult place.
Companionship. You know,
Manchester.
you know, we always have this debate, which is better, Manchester, Leeds. I mean, Leeds edges it, but, you know.
Powerhouse.
Manchester
You know.
has the suhba, yani.
SubhanAllah.
Of course.
You know, 3 unis, Windsor Road.
Oh, you can't beat Karimar.
I'll be to Manchester.
Yeah, don't worry, I know about Croydon. I'm from Sean, you think I don't know.
We need to go on a day trip to Leeds together, inshallah. We can see.
Leeds is nice as well.
Alhamdulillah.
It's good, but I can.
So you're at University of Leeds?
Yeah, I was at University
okay,
of
cool,
Leeds.
cool.
So, you know, going to university, I mean, it's kind of the thing that everyone was doing at the time anyway. Even up to now, it's just
You
go.
said it was hyped up before you went.
Yeah.
It's hyped up for the wrong reasons, though, isn't it? It's not hyped up for the education. People don't go for the experience. And the experience is what conflicts essentially a lot with what we do.
And once you get that fulfilling level of, okay, I've been hyped up enough, or I've had enough of this, the social element of it.
SubhanAllah.
It's like, okay, now
That's
I'm here
why
for
people
another
can often find that really difficult, because they think, I'm going to learn about everything. I'm going to experience life. Truly different, especially when you move out, like you said, you went all the way to Leeds.
Leeds, yeah.
You know, I went to Manchester as well, and you went to Manchester as well.
Yes.
MashaAllah, and you
went
went
Essex.
to Essex is just still very far.
We all went outside
Essex
London.
is
Yeah, Essex is the journey.
Essex is the journey. I
Yeah,
still you know, but it's you get hyped up for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And everyone else there is doing those things that they were hyped. The hyped essentially was hyped about.
SubhanAllah.
And so you were like, well, I can't do that. So what can I do?
Yes.
Yeah.
What can I do?
2 things that affect a lot of Muslim youth when they go to university. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are either at university or been to university, is doubts and desires, right? So these are the 2 main things that are going. These are the 2 things that are going to really, really test your university.
Sounds like a new poetry title.
So Allah, we'll see. It's inspiration, alhamdulillah.
You can work with Shu'aib as well.
Inshallah. Why not?
Going to Shu'aib, I did listen. So I heard one of his spoken word. MashaAllah.
Allah Mubarak.
Honestly,
That's beautiful.
MashaAllah.
Why not?
It was pretty impressive.
Ibrahim is the one that the limelight here. Ismail, sorry.
Alhamdulillah. So yeah, so for myself, I was speaking about the whole university. Yeah, so doubts and desires. And I would say alhamdulillah, all praise be to Allah, doubts wasn't something that really hit me that much. We always knew alhamdulillah, Islam is the truth and everything. But desires, subhanAllah, it was a test. And it's a test even up to now for a lot of us, for everyone really. You got your struggles that you go through. But when you're in uni, you're away from your parents, you're away from your family, you're away from... So now, if you're away from those companions that you had, now if you don't automatically connect with the ISOC, then you're going to have a bit of trouble there, in a sense where who are you spending time with? Who are you around? You literally, I remember when I sat down in my in my room, I saw leaflets full of like parties, raves, like flooded with it, discounts, like with so many parties and everything. So I was thinking, subhanallah, is this what kind of uni is? Now don't get me wrong, it's the environment that we're living in, and it's something that we understand, but it is like I didn't know how much it would.
You against the world, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
It really is.
It's tough.
There's no doubt about it. They can't
Subhanallah.
be around the bush. It's literally
You against the world, yeah.
That's how you feel.
So if you don't have a foundation and you haven't built yourself, and even if you're strong, you're still gonna go for it.
With London, it's different. London's, you can easily get by with a double.
Definitely. I think one thing I had to always remind myself is what principles I held true here.
Yeah.
What have my parents taught me? What are the things that are dear to me now that I need to hold fast with?
Yes.
You've got the brotherhood there, but you need to know yourself. You need to be true to yourself here. It's so easy for someone to just invite you to something. Yeah.
Is that kind of where the lost?
Yes, so that's where the lost essays came from. So I had a bit of a relationship with education. So I was going to lectures, and I was sitting in these lectures, and I was studying, but I was quite disengaged in a sense where I couldn't relate to what was being taught to me. So I was studying politics, and I thought I was going to be kind of like global politics. This is university level. Maybe at lower level, you're going to study different things, but university, this is where you expect the education system now to start opening up. You're going to learn about different cultures. And I was still getting hit with this Eurocentric ideology, studying these Eurocentric ideas. And I thought, okay, great. I mean, I'm in Europe. I'm studying in a European university. Great, it's England. But when are we going to kind of open up now and realize that the world is a lot more wider than just this country, And you've got all these students coming in with the same mentality where they want to open up their mind and study. And it's just Eurocentric. It's just too much. And it was like, okay, I was quite overwhelmed by it because my expectation versus the reality, they're completely different directions. So I became kind of disenfranchised by that, to the point where I didn't want to attend lectures anymore. I was just kind of like, okay, why am I studying this, and how is this going to help me in the world? If I'm studying politics to be a leader in the world, really and truly, I'd like to study about different political systems. And to be fair, I didn't really discuss it with the university in a sense. I just kind of went into my kind of cave there.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Yeah, because you might ask, why don't you go and discuss it with your seminar leaders? That wasn't my immediate reaction. My immediate reaction was kind of like to kind of go into myself but that mentality. So, and in that, to be honest, alhamdulillah, within that sense, maybe there was a blessing with that, because what happened was that I started writing. I started writing, and I started writing, and I started writing. A lot of the writing was coming out of frustration with the education system, frustration with, because I've come from, this inner city London, and then I'm coming to this kind of Eurocentric education environment, quote unquote Russell Group University.
Right.
So there's this kind of disparity there, and it just created this explosion within my mind, creative explosion. I don't know what to call it, but I just started writing so much to the point where I had written 20 poems while I was at university, and these poems were, I just thought, this is a book. Because when I read it, the theme is quite, the poems, the theme
flow on from each other.
Yeah, they flow from each other. So when I saw it, what do most people do in the environment that we're from? They might make a spoken word album, nasheed, something like that.
Right.
But I thought, I don't really see authors, people from the community writing books.
Writing.
Well,
So
what you've done, I commend you for, and I ask God to preserve you, because I think that a book is so much more noble, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Because a book can last for centuries,
Yeah.
And there's so much other more you found in a book.
Yeah.
So I really rate you for that, mashallah, and I preserve you. I think that's and you've inspired me as well, because I do writing as well daily. Maybe if it's not poems, I just do general fawaid. For me it's something I can't separate from myself.
Yeah.
Because it helps you.
It's an outlet.
Yeah, it's an outlet.
You can recollect your thoughts, and you can actually see how you're thinking. Are you thinking the right way?
No.
What is actually happening in society? Am I being a product of society?
Yes.
Or am I trying to be a product of my own development?
No.
Of what I want to see?
No.
And then you put that on paper, and if sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it shows you something that you would never find if you
SubhanAllah.
So I really rate that.
Okay, so we were at the point of in terms of your lost essays. In terms of the journey of lost essays, once you'd made the kind of the decision to actually produce the book.
Yes.
Where did you go from there in terms of then perhaps even forming it, sharing it with others? Were you comfortable even doing that?
Yes. So, cause I have a lot more passion for performance. I love writing, but for me, I feel in terms of bringing the words to life, performance is something that I enjoy. I had a bit of a background in performance arts and drama and that sort of thing, so I've always enjoyed performing and that sort of thing. So that was a key element for me. I wanted to perform it. So alhamdulillah, what I did was that I started to contact some people who I knew from around, different students from around the country, and asked to get into different societies so that I can come and just organize. So I organized the tour around the country, alhamdulillah. And
Where did you go exactly?
I went to University of Southampton. I went to, I was in Leeds. I was, subhanallah, where else did I go? London. I went about around London quite a bit. Sheffield, alhamdulillah. So yeah, just across, alhamdulillah, just recalling some of the things, but yeah.
Okay, great. And what kind of feedback have you got so far from this kind of thing? I mean, you kind of explained your intention going into this book,
Yes.
to kind of connect with the Muslim youth,
Yes.
let them know these kind of things, and also as an outlet for yourself,
Yes.
especially with performing it. That must be another outlet other than writing it.
Yes.
Or what kind of feedback have you got from your kind of target audience? Maybe to say that, yeah, I felt that, I understand it, anything like that.
And also an interesting point, even on that, this is probably another point to kind of respond to, was that did people actually understand what the lost essays were about? Did you have to explain this is what the lost essays, like what was that even a purpose of the lost essays to have to explain it?
Yes. So with the lost essays, I mean, anyone who kind of read it, you could easily kind of pick up an essence of the topics that we were discussing within the book. So you definitely get that idea. But in terms of me creating visual content, so at the time I was putting out videos from some of the poems in the book, and that helped to tell the story of it. Also, I put out 2 documentaries. I put out a
Two?
Yeah, there was another documentary I did.
Which one did I watch?
You watched the
Show you one.
This is the main one.
that one.
That was the main
Yeah,
one.
I put out one that was about the tour. That was more the story behind it. But also, I feel like I went more in depth in the second documentary. So the documentaries helped to tell the story behind the art and why I wrote it and things like that. So that also helped. But yeah, alhamdulillah, we got to perform. I think I performed in front of, in under 3 months, from October to December 2016, 2,500 people, I'd say, overall, across the different performances that I did. Alhamdulillah.
Like as Shu'aib, what kind of feedback did you get from this?
Oh yes, so the feedback, alhamdulillah, I'll say it's mostly positive feedback, but for the most part, different reactions. Some people, it was, because some of the poems I'm speaking about political issues.
Yeah.
So for some people, it's like that anger and that, yeah, I get you. I'm also, there's some people cried. I couldn't imagine someone crying from something I've said. SubhanAllah, some people just crying and different reactions, but it's that emotional element. I feel like with poetry, it's always going to get you somewhere, You're not going to stop home and say, oh, yeah, it's good. You're always going to listen to it and you're going to feel something, whether it's frustration, whether it's happiness, whether it's informative. I don't know if informative is an emotion, but you feel like you've been informed. That's also an emotion within itself. So there's different, different reactions.
Go into the next point now, which I shouldn't be doing, but, reconciling with faith. Sometimes I feel that when I listen to some poetry, I love spoken word, I love the arts, but sometimes I don't want to get too much into it because it's too emotive for me.
Yes.
And I feel like it might just distract me. Is that a bad thought, or am I just looking at it the wrong way?
That's perfectly fine. It's the balance. And for myself, because I was speaking about a lot of wider community topics, I wasn't speaking about Islamic topics, even though I was kind of relating to the Islamic audience because the topics affect them anyway, and I'm a Muslim, so that within itself, alhamdulillah, helped, but I wasn't speaking about Islamic topics. Now, I would say, looking back now, the nature of my writing has changed, where I'm writing a lot more about Islam and my faith relationship, alhamdulillah, but before I wasn't really more, it was more political, community-based and things like that. So you always feel sometimes like, am I contradicting myself by not speaking about the deen? Am I doing a service to my religion by not speaking about? I had that internal conflict, and I had conversations with my brother about that. Where should I even just quit this and stop this? Because am I doing this for the right reasons? It's a constant battle that you go through.
What about you, Shu'aib? You have any thoughts on that?
Yes, subhanAllah. I mean, it's just so interesting to hear about that because even for myself, when I was like indulging in music and things like that, I had this kind of dichotomy within myself where I was with a group of guys who are not Muslim, and we were kind of rapping or writing about certain things that are not Islamic at all.
Yes.
But I would always, within my writing, come from an angle of trying to bring some sort of Islamic element into it.
Yes.
Only because that was my identity at the end of the day.
Yes.
Was I was Muslim, even though I may have been involved in some sort of vices that may have come out through our music.
Yes.
I would always try and attach it in some sort of way, whether that even be in a negative way, sort of
Yes.
like, oh, I have a struggle with this. And why do I have a struggle? Because Islam tells me that I shouldn't do this, but I'm doing it.
I'm doing
right?
this, yeah.
So it's like interesting to hear how that kind of happens with yourself in terms of not just the writing,
Yes.
but just also who you're performing to, or whether you're connecting with that particular audience or not.
It's true. I would go to places, for example, and it would be a quote-unquote Islamic event. And you go there and it's just, there's nothing Islamic about this, you know, and the way it's being sold, and you go there, you perform, and it's like, you leave and you feel, alhamdulillah, I've inspired people, but yeah, is my intention even in the right place? Because I could have just left this venue. I'm not saying this, what they were doing was wrong, but let's say, for example, there's free mixing elements, there's just so much happening that shouldn't be happening.
Would you say that's like a microcosm of this wider principle of how do you understand your faith?
Yes.
And how do you reconcile this idea of creative arts
No.
can be a craft?
Yes.
But how do you use that to the betterment to be able to express
Yes.
the deen
Yes.
and to share it?
Yeah.
This is a very important conversation. We should have had this
It's
earlier.
true, because you know what you said about it being so emotive.
Yes.
Yeah? And this is exactly what you thought when you were doing music.
Mm.
That even though you knew that music, it's haram at the end of the day
Yes.
to dabble in that,
Yes.
but it was so emotive to you that even though you knew that it was hard to give it up, and the same way you feel like, you know, poetry has so much emotion in it, and the words have so much emotion, but what if you getting too much into it interferes with your faith? So I think like that's where it comes from. Can that area of being in creative arts, being in poetry, being in these arenas and these venues,
Yes.
that you were saying that so many un-Islamic things were going on,
Yes.
could you still be a Muslim and do this kind of thing?
Nah, you can. It's possible. But I feel for myself, it got to the point where that battle was too much. It was too much where I felt, first of all, I went back to it. So subhanAllah, Ramadan last year, I had a massive wake-up call where I picked up the Quran, English kind of translation of it, and I started reading through. And I realized, subhanAllah, these are the words of my creator, yeah? I haven't taken time to ponder really on the words of my creator. Alhamdulillah, I've been performing poetry, I've been doing public speaking, all these things, great. But I haven't pondered on the words of my creator to the extent that I should have been doing. Not saying I'm not practicing or I'm doing anything too wild, but it's just not on that level. I don't understand the Quran the way I should. I haven't memorized enough Quran. I don't have a relationship with the Book of Allah. So what that did for me with my poetry is that it made me ask the question of myself. I'm writing this poetry, but what significance does this have? Because now I've read the words of my creator and I've pondered on the words of my creator and I'm still pondering on them, but I feel like I was so touched by the Quran on such a deep level that I just lost passion for writing for a bit.
Wow.
I put the pen down, so to speak. I put the pen down, akhi. I said, you know what?
It's humbling
I'm taking a break because I need to learn about Islam now. I don't know anything. And people have...
The Quran, it was a book of poetry. When it came,
No.
the poets of Al-Walid al-Mughira, one of the greatest poets.
SubhanAllah.
You know, and he had a hidden arrogance of kibr. Why was this not revealed to me?
Yeah.
Because the poetry of the Quran outweighed any poetry of the Arabs, and the Arabs are known for their poetry.
Alhamdulillah. So I was inspired by the ayah in the Quran where Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Where Allah says in the Quran, and I did not create mankind and jinn except to worship me. So this purpose that I was looking for through doing poetry and public speaking and all of these things, I found this purpose in the Quran. I found this purpose with my Lord, with my Creator.
It's not just a feeling, is it?
It's not...
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it because
It's
it's like you're searching and then your creator, the one who created you, showing you, look, don't worry about that. I've given you the purpose. Worship me. It's such a humbling experience and it brings you down to earth.
I had the same experience. Well, not same, but very, very similar.
No.
Like throughout majority of my kind of teenage years, I was always kind of trying to find out what is my purpose, and I would pick up so many different skills. I was good at writing. I had a passion for music. I had a passion for public speaking. So all of these things, I thought, you know, once kind of I got much more involved in kind of the poetry, the rapping and all that, I thought, okay, this is what my purpose is, because it brings up all those skills together, right? It brings everything together, so surely this is what I'm meant to be doing.
Yes.
And I had that exact thing, that I went to the Quran and I was praying my salah and something just hit me. And I was like, this is what my purpose is. This whole time, I've been going around in circles trying to find it in writing and this and that, whereas Allah had already given me that book and already allowed me to be born within this religion. All I had to do was come back to that and see that Allah has told me that that's my purpose, is to worship Him. And it's not in these other outlets. But does that mean that we have to give up those kind of outlets?
Yes.
That's what I want to ask you.
So yeah, so with myself, what that did, so I was so, as it's part of a similar experience to yourself, I was so humbled by it. My immediate reaction was just to put everything down. And I had a conversation with Muhammad. Should I continue? Should I give up? What should I do? Should I just leave it now? Should I just focus on seeking knowledge first, or should I? And subhanAllah, I had to have an honest conversation with myself, because no one can have this conversation for you. This is between you and your Lord. You have to be honest with yourself. Are you at that level where you need to be? What are you doing? So I said, look, let me get back to basics. Let me study the basics of my religion. Let me try attend some beneficial lectures. Let me try to recite more Quran, and we see where it goes from there. So what I found naturally, the talent for writing didn't go. That was still there. That's always the alhamdulillah. If Allah's blessed you with that talent, that will always remain there. But now, because I had aligned with this new purpose, the writing changed. Where now I was writing more about Islam, writing about this purpose that I had now connected with, because the purpose was always there. But it was about me connecting with it. So now it was more about leaning towards writing about Islamic topics, trying to
So is this in the anthology, or is this not in the anthology?
No. So the anthology, it's mostly kind of political topics. It's mostly speaking about youth violence and all these things.
In a sense, the element that I get from Lost Essays is that it reflects the journey up until that point. It's a way of you being able to tell your story.
Yes.
So really and truly, that still reconciles with this aspect of you finding your faith eventually. So
yes.
So it'd be good for you to have another anthology then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Follow up, inshallah.
So people can read
Found
like
essays.
That's
That's not very creative.
No, I like that.
Inshallah.
Reconciling, I think, is really important. Sincerity is important. Public speaking as well. I can relate to that.
Same.
I can
I
relate
used
to
to
that.
do a lot of debating in school, specifically sixth form, funny enough. But one thing I realised, you don't have all the answers.
Yes.
You could be prepping for 15 minutes, parliamentary debating, and you could just be waffling. Waffling just for the sake of opposition or proposition. So it's not really, you need to have the substance.
So there is a space.
There is a
kind
space.
of creative arts for young Muslims.
There is a space.
But it's about how you're going to do it and why are you doing it.
You need to ask, why am I doing this? You need to have that honest conversation with yourself, because now we see there's a lot of fitting happening amongst the quote-unquote creative scene. So we have...
What do you mean by that?
A lot. No.
In summary...
It starts off so well as well. Karen.
If we can maybe be a bit more specific, what do you mean by that in the general sense?
Yes, so, I mean, do you want to...
No, I want you to answer this.
SubhanAllah.
You're the specialist.
You seem so passionate.
No, I want to add on to it.
As a form of advice and just wherewithal for our listeners.
All most of the brothers and sisters who get involved in I can speak about poetry, alhamdulillah, they mean well. I truly believe they mean well. Especially when they're starting off. For example, they'll have a page, they'll be speaking about beneficial topics in a poetic form. They'll be referencing, they'll start off well. Now, over time, as this thing called popularity comes in, subhanAllah, it's a major test,
Popularity,
followers. So, for example, a lot of the Muslim creative scene is based on Instagram and Twitter and social media, So when they start to kind of develop followers, and I can only speak from my own experience as well, now it becomes about, am I doing this for the right reason? I'm doing this for the sake of Allah, or am I trying to impress my followers? Because, when you speak about certain topics, you're going to get more, you speak about love, marriage, Islamic, you're gonna get, when you speak about, and when you speak about Tawheed, it's not as, what I mean? So it's like, then you gotta ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this for the followers? And then you start to lie to yourself and say, let me speak about this, so I can get the followers and then call them to Tawheed,
Ismail, it's like you get, when you start off on a really sincere journey, and I think like a lot of YouTube is a great example. Because you're just there talking about the things that you truly care about. And then you look at your views, and then you think, okay, I need to get X amount of views. You forget about the intention. I think you guys did the episode recently up to the previous episode, and you guys talked about that in detail, and I love that. And the same thing even with this podcast. I think that, when you say that when you look back to Islam, and that became your inspiration. Your writings formed from your Islamic spirituality in that sense. Same with this podcast, we also want to do that as well. I think we've been discussing this on so many occasions. We say we don't just want to make this a podcast, we just talk about life. I mean, life is important, but we need to make this a purposeful podcast. And we need to have purposeful discussions. We need to make sure the community are exposed to good discussions that they can benefit from. It's like it's centered around the purpose of benefiting people and
tangibility.
The tangibility of something. And it's this. I would say maybe in a sense this is kind of creative.
Yes.
I don't know.
Oh, definitely. This what you guys are doing here, alhamdulillah, is creative. In a sense, you're people who are. You're facilitating a discussion. In a sense, I don't even go as far. You're journalists in a sense, because you're telling a story, and that's what journalists do. They tell a story. They take you from one point to another. So even just this platform, in a sense, is creative. Yeah,
the thing that I get from that is that, obviously, in terms of this idea of reconciling between what the creative arts is all about, and obviously the faith is primordial in you. It's part of the fitrah. It's part of you. It's a continuous journey, but you need to understand that it's something you need to give priority and precedence.
Yes, definitely.
You need to understand it in your individual way, and you need to. It's not the same way that Hafs is going to experience it, or Maryam, for instance, or perhaps Hamza.
I see that.
Keep going.
The names that you use there.
I've just someone said something last time.
That was really good. I like that. Those two names.
Was it Khalid the Maryam or something?
I should be using that.
Subhanallah.
But yeah, the point that I'm getting there is you need to understand it in your own way.
It's true.
But understand the blueprints that are out there, and understand your situation is different, but know where your level is at and the things that you can handle.
That there. Know where your level's at. If you're an activist, you're an activist. You're not a faqih. You're not a qadi.
Yeah.
If you're a spoken word person, you inspire people. Stick to that.
Yes.
Don't delve into Islam is this, Islam is that.
Yeah, that's all. We've seen that, and we've seen
emotions.
That
They use their emotions to then dictate their own Islamic practice.
And it gets sticky. It gets to the point where you start affecting people's faith, and some people are telling you it's not something you want to go into.
And the youth get affected by this a lot, because they're seeing you as this kind of figure that I can look up to, or at least what you're saying, I like it, I like listening to it. And then you start going into things that are not in your lane, and they're going to get affected because they respect you. So whatever you say,
a lot of the youth, everyday youth we see walking around in the streets of London or wherever, they'll probably most likely listen to a poet before they listen to one of the shuyukh. And that's sad. I hate to say that.
As a poet, as a writer, you can be an advocate for that, to call them to more. That's an intermediary between.
I feel like that's what you said is true.
So you have a part to play.
We have a part, definitely, and we have a responsibility, and we need to accept that we can be a window.
That platform of X number of followers, you can actually hopefully
guide them to a better place.
Exactly. Inshallah.
Conversely, you could actually guide them to something that is not correct.
It's true.
That's true.
I can go either way.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point to bring it down to the closing topic, which is, what do you think is the vision for our Muslim youth living here today? Where do you see them going, and what do you hope for them to go?
Yes.
And what do you think is actually the medium to use to go to that vision that you think we should get to?
Yes.
Big questions.
So the current state of the Muslim youth is, alhamdulillah, many of us, I would say maybe second generation, third generation, our parents came from abroad, they came to the UK, they came with a vision for us and a vision for their family, alhamdulillah, and we were born into kind of Britain, British passports, British citizens, whatever it is, but at the same time still connected. So for us, alhamdulillah, we're kind of, we're kind of guinea pigs in a sense. We're human beings, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to, we're human beings, but we're the first of a kind, in a sense, we're the first to kind of, to be part of that second generation diaspora, British from somewhere, you kind of thing. So what we have is a unique opportunity where we can kind of reach into we could reach into multiple dimensions. The dimension of being British, so alhamdulillah, relating to the British people and the people in the country that we're in. Also, we can relate to the diaspora. If we really wanted to, we can also relate with, where we're from. That means that we've got a voice. a voice that can spread out to a
That's
wide...
a global voice.
That's a global voice.
That's global citizenship.
Outreach.
You have global citizenship just by you being from...
That doesn't mean you having multiple passports, by the way.
Exactly. You can have one passport and still be a global citizen, alhamdulillah, you know. So that means that we have a unique opportunity. Now we can get into all of the issues that are happening, you know, whether it's, you know, kind of religious extremism on both sides, whether it's this or that. But I don't want to bog down too much on on that, because I feel, you know, we want to be productive here. First thing we need to do is to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Learn about Tawheed, learn about who Allah is. Learn about who Allah is. Okay. Go back to the Quran. Learn about who the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. Go back to our deen first. Let that be our first point of reference. And then from that, inshallah, we're going to experience success. Because we find whenever the Muslims, and you look in history, whenever the Muslims have really gone out and conquered and alhamdulillah and progressed, it's when they held firm onto the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they held firmly onto their deen. This is what we need to return back. Make that our reference point. Learn about our religion. Learn about our deen. And then you need to figure out where you stand within the ummah. What is your contribution to the ummah? Yeah. So now once you've built that pride for the deen and that knowledge, and you've got that base level, some people are going to continue to gain knowledge, alhamdulillah. They're going to be students of knowledge and scholars, alhamdulillah. That's great. Yeah. But then there's other people who are going to be, who are professionals, and they can give charity. Their mothers, they have a role to play. Yeah. So you need to figure out, what is my role? And this is the kind of the message I want to give to the Muslim youth. You might not be where you want to be yet, but what is your role? Where do you see yourself within your community, within the ummah?
Do you even want to help the Muslim community as well?
Yeah, that's true.
I have to ask the questions first.
Yeah, it's true.
What you've just assumed.
I guess, do you even understand what the Muslim community is?
Yeah.
Do you know where it is? Can you relate to them?
Like, do you even want to help the Muslim community? Like, some Muslims don't even want to do that.
Yeah.
Even going through that barrier of the first question, do you want to help the Muslim
community? Yeah.
I think what you touched on, Ismail, is quite profound, because to me this is the essence of the deen, that you align yourselves with your ummah on that understanding of Islam.
Yes.
And as an ummah, you use that to branch out and to ensure that the rest of the community outside of the ummah benefits from the ummah. Yes. This is the essence of Islam, that once you take your shahada, you're on this journey towards Allah, and you facilitate for other people to also join this journey. Yes. And you do this through being a mother who understands Islam, through being a professional person who makes a lot of money but also understands Islam, through being a scholar, through being a spoken word artist that understands Islam. As long as, I think Islam is the only ideology in this world that can consolidate everything you can possibly do in your life with this one journey of Islam towards Allah. And I think that's like...
It's like the water in the cracks. So you just pour the water, it'll go wherever it is.
That's it. That's
it.
And that is why this ummah is meant to be so beneficial to the rest of the world. But unfortunately, we don't see that.
You work on yourselves, you work on your... Allah says in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. So, like, save yourselves. Save yourselves first, and your family, from the fire. So, like, it's like you have to, you work in your family first. You work as a home environment, then you go into communities. It's like it's different. It's like there's levels, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the issue with that sometimes is that people don't recognise the authority.
Yes.
You might be the authority at home.
It's true.
When you go outside, recognise the authority that's there. Upon birr. Appreciate that. Because they might have good intentions and everything and wanting to do things, but it's just the authoritative way of going about the hierarchy.
Mashallah. So many things to discuss in so little time, you know. We've maxed out the time.
We have a time for a bit of a piece, or?
Yeah, that's the thing. We're going to end it on a piece, inshallah.
Yeah. I think you're going a bit of a spoken word.
Ismail, obviously, although we haven't made it obvious, Ismail is actually, he's not a commentator, he's actually a spoken word artist. His job is to inspire the youth to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to get close to activism and working towards bettering society through themselves. So inshallah, without further ado, we have a short piece.
It's time we need to ask ourselves, what is our true essence? As human beings, what is our relevance? Most of us are coasting through life with no purpose. We only really care about what's on the surface. When we only get a couple likes, we get nervous. Money over everything. We worship the earners. We attach meaning to these products that we purchase, but we were created to be in service, to Allah. We were created, you see. But when I was a younger, it wasn't blatant to me. So I got into grime. I started spraying on beats. I just wanted my community to listen to me. Fast forward 10 years, now I'm focused on deen. Don't get me wrong, I still got flows, but you'll find me in the masjid, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah. That was good stuff. MashaAllah. Allah preserve you, I think.
Ameen.
Okay, with that being said,
which masjid, by the way?
East London Masjid, baby.
Where can listeners find you on
He's hidden,
social media?
The recluse.
SubhanAllah.
No, your address and your social address.
Naam. In terms of social media, I'm currently not on social media for some personal reasons.
Stay on social, stay out of it, man.
SubhanAllah. I'm just trying to focus on alhamdulillah, but I mean, if you type in obviously my name, alhamdulillah, some of the work will still be up. TED Talk and everything, other stuff will be up, inshallah.
Yeah, you did a TED Talk as well.
We'll put something in the description and people can click on it.
Yeah, that should be fine, inshallah.
And for the listeners, inshallah, make sure you're following us on our social medias. If you can't follow Ismail, but you can follow us.
Inshallah. Definitely follow these brothers, inshallah. Support them.
Ibn Battuta as well on all the social medias: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud. All of that is there.
It's good to read.
every time. Put some comments down below, inshallah, if you're watching this on YouTube. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Hit the like, the subscribes, and on SoundCloud, just you can download this episode, keep it on your phone, on your PC, share it around to everyone, inshallah. And keep following us, as we've got definitely got some new good content coming through, inshallah.
Not just content, there's going to be some changes as well, inshallah, some additions, and the platforms and stuff like that. So stay on the lookout on our social media. You'll find out later on. Inshallah.
No wrap up.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah. Barakallahu feekum.
تقل قد ذهبت أربابه كل من سار على الدرب وصل في ازدياد العلم إرغام العدا وجمال العلم إصلاح العمل جمل المنطق بالنحو فمن يحرم الإعراب بالنطق اختبل انظم الشعر ولازم مذهبي في الطراح